Welcome to another episode of Fantasy News, where I, your host Daniel, who has so many qualifications to do this, talk about all of the fantasy-related news in the recent days. I've had a few people comment thinking this is supposed to be like a weekly show, or even like a twice-a-week show, because for a while it was coming out very frequently, and that is not the case. I want to clarify that I will be doing this show whenever I find just enough stories, or a big enough story, that kind of just call for an episode. And luckily, because of the fantasy news section in the Discord server, you guys have fulfilled another fantasy news episode. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. First and foremost, we're getting two more. That's right. I think the count was at 8 upcoming shows. We've officially hit double digits. Now we're at 10. It looks like Andi Shankar is in talks to produce a Legend of Zelda TV series. Oh boy, this one could be interesting, but even me as a massive fantasy nerd, I'm just tired of fantasy TV shows being announced. Let's not all clamor for be the next Game of Thrones, please. And then the second one, which is officially bringing us to double digits as far as I'm aware, is Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Looks like it's also in talks with BBC America to become a new series. And boy oh boy, that actually could be really cool. Because I didn't love the Discworld books, but they could certainly be adapted into something quite awesome. So with those two, we are officially, I think, hitting undeniably a oversaturated fantasy market. What does this mean? It means it'll be very difficult for a show to succeed and build a sustainable audience. Basically, they need a studio behind it who can just outlast many other fantasy shows to let the audience split die down. Luckily, only a few of these have huge studios behind them as far as I'm aware. The ones like Wheel of Time, Witcher, and Lord of the Rings have larger studios with bigger budgets, and I think they have the best chance of outlasting the overall crowd. So that's actually going to be a new hurdle for these series to overcome, and I'll be pulling for quite a few of them. Next up in fantasy news, we got our first look at Henry Cavill as The Witcher a few days back, and it looks like this. I'm not the biggest fan, but I'm assuming, I'm hoping, I'm praying this is not the final look we're gonna get for The Witcher here, because Geralt is not supposed to look so young, and the hair isn't supposed to clash so harshly with him, and he just doesn't look Geralt-y at all. I'm hoping there's a revamp to this look, because you can certainly make Henry Cavill look more gruff. I actually think he could act well enough to fill this role, especially after seeing him in the latest Mission Impossible. As I've said before, he can do gruff, he can do tough, he can be someone you don't want to mess with.
I prefer a hammer.
You can't take the heat, don't light the fuse.
But yeah, this look right now, not feeling it. When it comes to looks from books adapting to movies or TV shows, I'm very okay with them changing it however much they need to make it just look good. They don't need the long hair, they can give him a beard, all that stuff. It doesn't bother me personally that much when they go ahead and update a character's look to make them look better on the screen. Because I get it, things aren't going to adapt from the book perfectly every time for a character, and it's a little absurd to think they would. So if they wanted to change this, I personally wouldn't be offended. And I don't think a lot of Witcher fans would be offended, but maybe the author has a bit of control here, maybe he would be offended. We all know that I'm not the biggest fan of him. But this is not a shot at Henry Cavill. I like him quite a bit. This is not a shot at Netflix. I like them a lot, and I think they probably do a good job with The Witcher overall. It's just this look in this shot specifically, not taking a shot at anything else, not saying it's going to be bad. I just don't like the way this looks necessarily, and I'm hoping Henry Cavill can recognize it too. He seems like a good guy. Seems like a guy with taste. So I'm gonna assume he's gonna be able to be like, yeah, no. Next up in fantasy news, provided by Terraria. How's it going, Terraria? Apparently, BBC is going to modernize the His Dark Materials adaptation they're working on, and I really don't know how I feel about that, especially because the modernized term they're using is not elaborated on beyond just saying they're going to modernize it and to make it more accessible for current audiences. And I gotta say, that does not sound good to me. One of the best things about His Dark Materials is the fact that it covers some topics that are fairly controversial, the fact that it feels kind of from another era is something I really enjoyed about his Dark Materials, and I'm not in love with the idea of trying to modernize it kid accessible, because just trying to make things kid accessible, just trying to make them overly PC, I'm not the biggest fan of. And that's coming from someone who is fairly PC. I don't like the idea of taking a source material and changing a really great story purely to appease audiences that could be upset. Because I've read his Dark Materials, and there's nothing in there that should make people extraordinarily offended. Now, maybe they're using modernized here literally, and they're just going to change the time setting. It didn't quite elaborate even enough in the article to say one way or the other. And in that case, I'd be even more confused, because I love the kind of more old-timey feel, as I said, for his Dark Materials, and having it just change the time to be like let's tweet about our demons. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say I don't like that. I'm gonna say don't do that. It did not work for the Fahrenheit 451 adaptation. It will not work for you. I'm sorry. People don't want social media and stuff like that integrated in their stories. Next up in fantasy news, Skyrim composer Jeremy Soule wants to score Amazon's Lord of the Rings. And you know what I'm going to say to that? Yes, please, because I don't want to put Skyrim music in my video because I'll get copyrighted, but it's really great. Here's my impersonation of it. It's great. It's wonderful. And having someone who has that experience, who's done such an incredible job helming and theming and, getting the feels for you for Lord of the Rings show would be awesome. I'm 100% down. Let's do that. And this is kind of just on more of a personal side note. I really, really love video games, even though I don't play them that much. I respect them as an art form, and Skyrim is undoubtedly a masterpiece when it comes to artwork. There's a reason it's adapted to all these new consoles and still sells like crazy. People love it because it's incredible. It probably has the most hours played on it of like any modern game out there, because it's just something people can sink tons of time into and still get new content out of. And having someone who previously is best known for scoring video games turn around and score something like Lord of the Rings, I like that. It makes me kind of happy, and I just see it as a net positive for the industry, both industries. The TV industry gets an incredibly talented composer, and the video game industry gets someone who is kind of going to transcend it. And, that to me lends more credence to the idea that video games should be respected just as much as TV shows and movies. And again, this is coming from someone who does not play many video games. I just don't like seeing that industry get disrespected like it does. On a final note, we have to end on the saddest story of recent days, and I didn't want to do this video for this right after he passed, because I always feel like that's kind of clickbaity and a little scummy, but Stan Lee passed last week, and it's a tremendous loss for fantasy, sci-fi, fiction, writing, literature, humanity. Stan Lee was an incredible mind. He did a lot to progress comic books. He shaped so many people's lives, and, love the guy forever for that. I've been reading his books for ages. There's a lot of false claims about Stan Lee out there, people trying to attack his character, but the reality is he was an incredibly progressive guy who made some of the first black superheroes, who was, very progressive, very trying to bring minorities into the spotlight as much as everyone else. His philosophy of making superheroes people and relatable helped propel many of the greatest comic book stories we've ever seen, and I just think he was a net positive for the human race overall. Stan Lee was an incredible dude, and Excelsior. And now, there was a person I mentioned recently that I wanted to kind of clap at in my rhetoric videos, and no one got upset about who I mentioned. And it was like the only person I mentioned that everyone was just like, yeah, you can definitely criticize him. And he decided to chime in on Stan Lee's death, and that is Bill Maher. Bill Maher made a blog post where he essentially says that everyone who's mourning Stan Lee and says that Stan Lee is great is childish, and he basically comes across as a pretentious asshole, saying, you know what, I'm not grateful for Stan Lee, I'm grateful for oxygen and trees. And Bill Maher, this is why people hate you. This is why people across the board hate Bill Maher. He is the definition of a pretentious douche who will do whatever he can to make himself feel superior. I'm not attacking his rhetoric here. I want to attack Bill Maher on a personal level. He makes liberals look bad. He gives the extremes on the other side, which are not healthy as well, tons of ammo. He's a net negative for humanity, in my opinion. And I think Bill Maher, well, he can be kind of funny in his stand-up, is one of the least helpful people with a megaphone out there, and is partially responsible for the divide we see in this country. And this most recent Stan Lee comment is just a prime example of why. He will do whatever he can to get his name in the headlines. He knew exactly what that blog post would do. And honestly, me talking about him right now is giving him a little bit of what he wants, even though I'm so small he wouldn't care about me. But I just want to flat out give my opinion on this. Bill Maher's a bad person and has done nothing but lower the bar for discourse. And attacking people's childhood hero like that for no reason, just someone who did touch many lives, and then turning around and saying like, you like the guy who wrote comic books, I like trees and air. Billy boy, this is why your fan base is the most obnoxious group of people on the planet. And I'm not saying all of them. If you're a fan of Bill Maher, don't feel like I'm attacking you. I'm attacking a majority of his fan base, and just the raw unlikability of a person who would say that about someone who just passed, and people who were touched by his creations and his positive outlook and influence on the world. So that is why Bill Maher is insufferable. His fans tend to be the same way, and I can't wait to see what people say when Bill Maher passes. I'm assuming it's going to be a collective. Okay. Anyway, guys, that's this episode of Fantasy News. Sorry for ending it on such a bummer note. When I read that, Elliot Brooks sent it to me, and it just made me go, yeah, I'm not surprised. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.